Um, cool. So
Cool.
we are
Cool.
continuing our little discussion on POV with some stuff that we didn't get to last time, and that will be about codifying menswear, and dressing like style archetypes, aka as Kyoshi called it, uh, cosplaying, which is something that we've always kind of talked about. Spencer and I have always said, we sometimes we cosplay Drake, sometimes we cosplay um, Pricelands and stuff.
And
But,
sometimes we cosplay Bleach.
Hmm? Oh,
I couldn't name a
yeah,
Save your
single
head.
character from Bleach, unfortunately, but
I haven't watched Bleach. It would
Hey,
have
if
yeah,
you
been
didn't say
better.
anything, nobody would have questioned it. So
yeah.
That's right. Likes and dislike hope. Yeah, we could talk about that too. We'll get into it. But first, let's talk about codifying menswear because I think that something that I've always kind of like noticed is that I tend to categorize things or codify things. And one of the complaints I've gotten is that sometimes it reduces people to very like narrow things, but it's
Mhm.
usually mentioned to be like condescending. You know what I mean? Like it's just like in my head, it's like a starter pack, right? And I think there are starter packs for everything. Like I especially love it when those memes
Well, I mean, I
they
think that's the starter pack memes are usually very condescending, so maybe not the best defense.
yeah. Uh, but it's let's just talk about it really quick. Spencer, did you ever like codify things? Because I mean, maybe we're biased because of our upbringing, right? Like we talked about it in the
I
POV
mean, I
episode where
think
we're,
it's I think it's
you
just
know,
something that comes with vintage because there's a lot of like different styles, and then you can
hmm
break. I mean, the most obvious one is just to break things down by era. Um, so I mean, yeah, I think I did that a lot, like with certain styles. I would say it's like, oh, this is like, the post-war bold look, or this is like kind of a. I mean, I've talked about the my favorite very niche look, the 1950s like con man,
so yeah,
which that's all about like codifying it. So it's like kind of like how I would describe it is that's the kind of look that you saw a lot in the early and mid 50s. It's like darker colors. So like,
yeah,
black, kind of like maybe shiny suits. You would get some like Western stuff mixed in, like bold patterned sport shirts. But I mean, that's something that like what I just did there. That's what I do with a lot of individual like different looks. I just think of like a typical outfit for them, and that's, I think, how you could like kind of call it, like that's what you would call codifying it, I guess, for me.
right, yeah, because um, I always think that that's always like the easiest way to explain a style,
Hmm.
right?
Yeah,
Like,
just naming like a couple things that you typically see with it.
yeah, because it's like I don't know when exactly I started doing I know outside of vintage because again, like we said, you look at it like, okay, that's like like you could even say like that's 30s between 30s and 50s, but then you could also be like, okay, that's a 30s collegiate look, or that's a
Hmm.
30s workwear look because a 30s workwear look will have, like it'll be more type ones and type twos. But then when you
Yeah,
get to, later on you get like more of like the trucker jackets, right? Or like, so it's always kind of good to kind of figure that out and to codify it because that way you can tell people, like we always say, we can't help you unless you tell us what style you're
yeah.
after,
And I
which is
mean the
why
other, yeah,
codifying.
exactly. You have to, if you yeah, that was the other thing. You had to know this stuff in vintage so you can put together like a coherent look, and you can know what you were looking for.
Yeah, exactly. And I think when it changed for like regular stuff is
Mhm.
maybe it was a little bit of the meme of, I had to do it to him, like like that
Yeah.
preppy guy, and people will be like, "Oh yeah, like that's such like a that guy kind of a thing," right? And then I saw like it wasn't Sad Boy Central, it was like something before that. It was some like other like indie meme gaslighter guy like dating like making fun of like dating in that culture, and it was like, "Don't get your hearts broken by this guy." And it was like it showed like Dickies work pant, white socks, Vans, and like a French chore coat or like some kind of like, flannel and then like a beanie. And I'm like, yeah, that is what that guy would wear, And it's like every this sounds kind of bad, but like every girl that I was into, like on Tinder or whatever, like if things didn't work out, if we were still friends, I would see that they would date that kind of guy, and I'm like, oh, so there's like a lot of other like starter packs, codifiers for that kind of a thing, because I think people are resistant to being called like being codified, right? Like they get offended, like reducing them to like just
An
like
archetype.
the plain thing. Yeah, right? Because it's like, you know, no one wants to be told that they're basic, right? Or that they are the epitome of some subculture because especially within men's fashion that we've discussed in the past, right? Like you get into it and you're told that, oh yeah, you're better dressed than every like 80% out there, which is true. But then you still look like the 1% of the remaining 20%, and that's still very noticeable for people who are in that 20% of people who pay attention to style, right? That's why the whole gi the blue gingham J. Crew shirt is so, like, iconic. Like, my dad has, like, 3 of them, and it's like a sign of, like, that guy who is, like, wants to step it up, but, doesn't wanna wear spear points or OCBDs or anything, right? Yes, you can say yes if you want to agree
Yes.
with me.
Everyone,
Please
No,
clap.
You're like a
yeah,
professor.
yeah, yeah.
Does
I mean,
anyone
again,
have any
but
questions? Are we
enamored.
yeah,
sure
we
that
know,
we don't have
we
any
know. You
questions?
can, it's fine if you guys wanna type it in. I see Kiyoshi
Raise
is
your hand.
typing something. Did you have? You can just, anyone can jump in
He's
about
eating
codifying,
popcorn.
but I definitely think. Let me just like before we jump into everything else. Okay, that I really do think it's important to kind of do because that's what got Adam into it, right? Like that's my friend. He like I think he viewed like menswear as just, oh, just dressing formal. But then I'm like, no, like you got to look at it as like a guy who's into that kind of a thing, right? Where
Mhm.
you know, I was like, "Oh, Adam, you dress like an editor." He wears like a hood. Like when we hung out, he just wears like a hoodie, a t-shirt, and like low-rise jeans that are like way too skinny for him. And he's like he's like a big guy, so kind of similar build to Spencer. But like imagine Spencer wearing skinny jeans, which I can't even imagine, you know?
Thank you.
Um,
I mean, I think, yeah, I mean, we talk about the importance, yeah, we talk about the importance of like kind of figuring out what do you want to look like, and codifying it is really the easiest way to do it. It
yeah,
kind of
because
like
yeah.
reduces, it kind of like, it, maybe I'm being a hypocrite because I talk about how I don't want to take the fun or the creative aspect out of dressing, and this kind of boils it down to a more scientific thing, but it's a really helpful like jumping off point.
Yeah. I mean, if you can recognize it,
Hmm.
that's like step one, right?
Yeah.
Because it's kind of like I don't know, like I this is something for me, and again, Spencer I've talked about this a long time, Spencer always tells me, people don't have the same discernible taste across all things, right?
Hmm.
Like I've met a guy who like really likes collecting or watching really good movies, but then he still uses Instagram filters on his like with his Instagram posts, and I can't in my head, like I can't fathom that. That makes absolutely no sense to me that you can have such great taste in one thing and then not in something else. Obviously you don't have to. This is a very common thing in the world, but it's just kind of like, I think like a lot of people will be able to be like, "Oh, well, that's not technically indie R&B, like that guy is actually this or something," or they can pick apart some like whatever rock this is or whatever rap this particular thing is. But then if you describe clothing, it's like, "Oh, I don't know, I just dress nice." It's like, "What the fuck?" Like, you can't like, come
Yeah.
on, dude, like,
It's
use the
just a button-up
words.
shirt, Ethan. Come on.
But it's like yeah, I know, and it's just like it's I would say it's harder to discern music than to do clothing, Like, it's just it's
But I
like,
think
I
the
think we
differences between clothing though, like different, like what's a good jacket, sport coat, and what's a bad sport coat. That difference is much more nuanced than say the difference between
but
jazz and a name of no genre of music.
no, but
It's
it's not about that. It's about, okay, what makes smooth jazz different than fucking, I don't know, like lounge jazz, because we're not talking about what's good or not. See, you're getting it,
but the
with
difference. Okay, but
clothing.
the differences between genres is much wider between so smooth jazz and big band, for example. It's much more apparent to the layman then the difference between a properly constructed lapel and the really
But that's
really
not the
flat lifeless.
question though. It's
Yeah,
like, what do you want to look like? The question is
And also, I think a lot of people would just listen to both things and be like, "Yeah, jazz. That's both jazz."
well, I
Well,
just mean
it's
people who have that taste, because I think a lot of people know that for their favorite thing, and then when it
Yeah.
comes to dressing up, obviously people have this idea, because I mean, like, you guys still have to pick what you wear. It's not like Spotify where you just go into like a a random playlist, right? Like
Mhm.
you still have to pick out what goes into it. So I'm just surprised that people who are very picky or able to discern their musical taste or even their movie genre taste, when it comes to clothing for themselves, they can't decide what that is, what that aesthetic is, or codify it.
Well, I think
Just
you have to have that like kind of interest in clothing. And if you
that's true.
don't,
That's yeah. Go ahead, Matt.
because someone who's
Spencer.
someone else go on.
Well, I was just gonna say, like, people that I admire that are like in their craft, like musicians, like opera singers or whatever, like they can still be great and focus clearly on what they're doing. But then, like, they might do like influencer style Instagrams and just like I roll your eyes a bit, or
Wild.
just like, well, you know what I mean? We're just like, why
Well,
don't they like?
I get it.
I think with that, I get it more because I think a lot of these people might not necessarily be interested in doing social media. And so that's when they just like talk to someone and be like, okay, what do I got to do to be good on social media?
Exactly. You
And
find your
yeah,
focus and what you like, and then everything
Right.
else you just do like the basic version. So they might be wearing like the J. Crew starter pack or whatever because they don't care. They have to focus on whatever their interest is.
I absolutely agree. Like David says here, yeah, people's interests and passions fall into different categories. Some guy might love high culture stuff but love to eat fast food. We're right there with you, baby. That's me. Um,
Mhm.
Called you
but
out.
I do think that's why I think it's so important to focus on the codifying whenever you're trying to get into that, that next level. Because again, like I said, like with Adam, I've had like, we've had like when I was getting to meet him, he loves watching Criterion Collection, all that kind of shit. Same thing that we're all kind of into, which is probably why, a lot of us share some of the same interests, or at least, when you dig deep, we're all different, but overall, good films, good music and all that kind of stuff. But once I was able to spin it that way for him, like, okay, like think of it that way. Like this band is garage punk, and then this one is a bedroom pop. I don't know. Like, so let's listen to that. Think about that in terms of clothing. Well, like this is like workwear, and then this is like the Los Felices guy interpretation of workwear, or this is, or buying from Naked and Famous is kind of like the or Taylor Stitch is kind of like being the tech guy who's wearing workwear, but then he doesn't do any workwear in real life. And I think that's what kind of clicks. And I think that everyone has that taste. It's just hopefully when it comes to figuring out what you want from clothing, you're able to kind of take that
Yeah.
and
It
apply
would
it
be
there.
it would be really nice. I just feel like there are people that are uninitiated and don't care what they wear, and maybe they don't need to dress up or whatever, and that's not a requirement to them. But then people who are in the spotlight a little bit, either they're stylist or they will find out this certain threshold of information, like your hashtag menswear info about what to do to dress, and then they just stop there. So there's no need
Yeah.
to codify what workwear means to them. They don't care. They
Mm.
just whatever they need to get by, which is unfortunate. But I think that's why you're seeing that gap of knowledge, at least in menswear, with those people.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, I hope if they watch this or something, they're like, "Huh, maybe I can use my same analytical taste and use it with clothing,"
Yeah.
They're
Because
making movies, man. they can't.
Well, I
yeah.
They
think
can't go anti workwear.
I think
Well,
there's starting to be more of a collective baseline knowledge for
yeah.
clothing now. I think so.
Mhm.
Maybe
Well, I
eventually,
think fashion is
the,
coming in culture, right? It's becoming
yeah,
enculturated. So
Yep.
the grounding or the baseline is rising. We're
yeah,
at that threshold is increasing in terms of what people wear at the start. So
because
that's
it's
good.
kind of like I mean, I know we use the tech analogy or comparison a lot, but right, it's like
Right.
even like my grandparents like know how to work an iPhone, but it's
Yeah.
like if you show them how to do like the same thing on like a desktop or a laptop, like they're completely lost. But there's still like a baseline for like, oh, I can like set the GPS on the phone, or I
Mhm.
can I can
Right.
send an email to to like whoever, but
Yeah.
it's like the more detailed stuff, I guess, is like that upper level
Yeah.
of knowing.
Yeah,
So
that's
I just want to read a comment from
go ahead.
Dan in the chat. I want to ask my friends to put together their own inspo albums so I could tell them what kind of clothing they should start looking for. But I'm afraid they'll just give me a bunch of those muscle suits from Instagram. I
That's
think that that might be the case, and that's what's really hard about getting
talking with
started. Well,
people.
just getting started, because even if you do say, well, if the first thing you got to do is like figure out what you like, they like a lot of people won't even know where to look. They will
Yeah.
go on Instagram and search suit, and then they will
Yeah.
find a bunch of those, and they'll be
And
like,
Hashtags.
well, this is
Unfortunately,
probably
they
it.
need someone to tell them.
Yeah.
I mean, this is why that kind of comes down to that whole like Ethan negging thing that we talked about the last time, where I'm like, I'm like, no, tell me what you want to look like, and then you just keep pushing them until they're like, oh, I want to look like, if they say Ryan Gosling, okay, then we got something, like you want to look,
Mhm.
like the whole, was it no, what is it? That's not Eat, Pray, Love. What the fuck is
Crazy
it?
stupid love.
Crazy Stupid Love. That's right. And I think that's kind of like that. Like I keep saying, like that's so important. You gotta like not force them, but like you have
Mhm.
to get them to think about it that way because it's like someone says I like all kinds of music. It's like no, you don't. It's like
I very
that's not
much
true
doubt
at
it.
Just
all.
haven't
I
looked
very
into
much
it.
doubt it.
There's something you won't
Yeah,
listen to,
no,
guaranteed.
but
Let
yeah,
me
but
show
I
you
mean,
some
it's
Weber.
like you say that, but then like if we look at your like, it's not even that whole thing of like you know what you don't like. It's the fact that if we look at your Spotify, we will still be able to codify what's going on because we could see, okay, well, there's a lot of I don't know, there's a lot of Taylor Swift here. Maybe you like that kind of pop, or maybe there's a lot of Mumford and Sons. Maybe you like, like indie folk, like or mainstream indie folk, right? There is that aspect where I think that you get lost in trying to codify what you don't like, but you should definitely codify what you do like because
Mm.
like you can't just say I like all American food because something tells me that if we go to like I don't know, just because you like American food doesn't mean you're gonna like Denny's, right? Like that's not like yeah, they have a burgers are in and out too, but it's still different, and that could even just be taste in like discerning what types of American food there are, and
I kind of, yeah.
no, go ahead. I was gonna say you
I,
should be able to know that, but go ahead.
No, yeah, you should. I kind of shitted on the guy who's like making the step up from the uninitiated to try, but then usually stopping at the hashtag menswear. But now that I say it, it's like at least some of the time they're like taking the beginnings, they're taking a step in the right direction to define something.
Yeah.
Like this is a version, and then you can branch off from there to their more specific thing. Again, just kind of
Right.
pushing it forward, seeing where they're interested in, and what path they go on. So when it works, it's great. But a lot of
When
the
it works,
times,
it
yeah,
works.
when it works, sometimes. Yeah, this is a niche, tricky subject matter. So I'm curious what our other people in the Discord have to say about this.
So talk. What do you have to say about this?
What do you have
Tell
to
us.
say?
Kiyoshi,
Especially those who work in the
Kiyoshi
industry.
dropped in the
Jason or Kiyoshi, tell
yeah,
us.
he dropped in the live chat, I think.
Yeah.
All right. Well,
So-
that's
Wait,
good to hear.
So I think one of the reasons why some people might have trouble articulating what their style isn't that they don't know, because obviously you put on clothes every day, right? Like you get up in the morning, you presumably put on clothes, go to work, or you go see your friends or live your life. But I think when people are asked by someone maybe in conversation or a salesman, like what's your style? Like I think people like are maybe like often thrown off by that question because there's like an expectation that like you want to respond with something cool, right? You want to say like, oh, I'm like this kind of
Yeah,
person,
that's
or
true.
I'm like I like these type of celebrities, these type of looks. And you're trying to like meet the expectations of the person asking you. Like, so if it's like someone that you see as a potential partner, like you're like, oh yeah, like I want to like make myself seem cool, and I don't want to
Yeah.
say I want to look like a 1960s college student. Like I don't think that's like a very often answered, but that might be actually what you like to wear and predominantly is in your closet. So I think maybe that is one. Like there's a disconnect or a gulf between what people actually do and what they say they want to look like.
Mhm.
Mhm.
And I actually get this a lot with wedding clients at work because some guys, they'll have like a Pinterest or a couple photos saved on their me, and then I'm like, okay, so you say you want like this look, but I've shown you these fabrics in person and told you about them and why it may not work best for your wedding or whatnot. Or yeah, and like when they talk through it and you like work through like the logic steps of what they think they wanted, it isn't, or what they've said that they wanted, it isn't what they actually want.
Mhm.
Right.
And sometimes like it's really just like they see a bunch of pictures and like, okay, I think that looks cool because it's a well composed photograph with good lighting and good editing, right?
Mhm.
And then I'm like, well, your venue's not actually outdoors, it's actually indoors, and it, it's this type of wedding, not like this style of wedding. You've been telling me about how you want certain colors, none of those colors would really work this color suit, if you're worried about that sort of thing. So people, what they say they want isn't exactly what they actually want sometimes. And
Mm.
Mm.
I kind of feel like a lot of that crosses over to this kind of like their own style because one, I think it's a vocabulary problem, but two, it's more of an expectations and kind of saving face with people on a conversation about
Mhm.
these sorts of things. Most
Mm.
people won't tell you that, like, oh, I just throw on jeans and t-shirts because I'm lazy. Like, like a lot of people aren't going to say that. A lot of people aren't going to like admit to what they actually are unless
Right.
like they're extremely honest and really don't give a shit about how they're
Hmm.
perceived.
Mhm.
Well, do
Well,
do
it's
you
not like a
think
thing anymore to care about clothing. Like did they wear the t-shirt and jeans because I care too much about clothing that makes me come off weird? Like that's not. I feel like that's so outdated. That can't be a
No, I
thing.
feel like I feel like a lot of people just don't want
well,
people to think that they care about things because I think I've talked about this on the stream. Once you care about something, you are open to
Oh, right.
criticism. The guy who like does not give a shit what he wears, you can't criticize him because he doesn't give a shit. But if you care and you wear a bad outfit, then people are going to make fun of
This
you,
the
and then
second that guy
it's
shows
more
up with a
personal.
vest over
Yeah,
his white t-shirt and jeans, it's
Mhm.
over. Game over.
Exactly.
well,
Yeah.
I
But
would.
don't you? But don't
I
you
was
think the
actually
issue might
gonna
be?
say.
Go ahead, Ethan.
I was gonna say, Kiyoshi, do you think that that's because you work like you're a salesperson, so you're kind of like in a position of power, right? Like you're kind of like they want to look cool
You're
to the
pulling the
guy selling.
strings.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but
Yeah,
I was
and
about to say,
actually, I mean that actually like really ties into the psychology of like sales and like how I dress and
right.
how I like
Mhm.
groom and all that stuff myself like now with these clients versus like 5 years ago
Yeah.
because um when I worked my last job in California at this men's shop, I was really into like, oh, I'm at like a men's store, so I want to
Hashtag
dress.
menswear.
Yeah, it was
Like my
like
store.
a little bit of that, but like it really like I was like, well, I don't want to look I want to look like more like the suit guy. So like I had like a very like almost Wall Street look. If you could like create a stereotype starter pack around that, it was like pinstripe suit, Oxfords, contrast collar shirt, and like no joke, and like foulard
Yeah.
tie.
Yeah.
Right.
All right.
And
Mhm.
and it
Contrast
was
color
like
Oxfordshire.
No, I think he meant shoes, right?
Oxford shoes, yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
Yeah.
The other
Balmorals.
one.
So like and it was like very much like a down the road, like
Right.
slick menswear suit guy. Yeah, that would work like in like downtown Manhattan.
Right.
Mhm.
As a stereotype. And it was like
Hmm.
I didn't really realize it's like, dude, you're meeting with people who are on vacation. And they're at like Carmel by the Sea in California, which is like very relaxed, casual place.
Yeah.
Coming in with this like whole like power suit thing, like you're Donald Trump's intern, is like a terrible look in Carmel, California, in
Yeah.
this store. And like
Well.
it's like not reading the room. It was more like it was the wrong codifying idea. Like the idea was
Yeah.
codified, but it was a bad one. And
Right.
that whole experience like taught me like with this job where everything I do is by appointment, one-on-one, and I I almost never want to dress like Mr. Suit Guy and like be over the top, pocket square, necktie, French cuff,
Right.
Yeah.
tie bar, three-piece suit,
Right.
really slick looking, because uh it comes across like too strong. It's like if you're going to go car shopping and like, the sleazy car salesman guy comes up and tries to like death grip your hand the moment he shakes it. Like,
Oh
you
god.
can't do that with you. It doesn't work with my personality, and it doesn't work with the clientele. And that's when I kind of realized, like, clothing, when I'm in like the sales role, it's you have to kind of bring yourself down a little bit. You still want to look, I was like professional and like you know what you're
Mhm.
doing, but you don't want to look too good. You don't want to look too
That's why.
polished.
Yeah.
And I feel like that helps with, I think, with the in the conversation that I had with these guys, where I'm trying to get them to, tell me what they're looking for so I can help them make a decision. And that's part of that, is like knowing how to ask questions in the right way to see what they're really interested, what they actually like, not just like what, a bunch of photos that were cool on the internet they're showing. That's kind of a starting point, but it's not really getting into um what they actually want to buy and wear, per
Mhm.
se. And that's it's a deeper conversation down on, and it can take a little while to get there for some people. But yeah, anyway.
Well, that's why I liked when I was at Brooks, like dressing in sort of that Drake style, being a young guy there. Because yeah, we did have like the old people, but we did get like young people occasionally. So showing way, or just people that are new, like again, the entry people who are starting to care about style and all that stuff. So showing that you
Mhm.
don't have to be in a very formal, strict suit. You could just kind of relax, be a little bit casual with it. I think that's important to get that vibe across, that you can make something look your own and not so rigid. So yeah,
Mhm.
I get what you mean. They're kind of adjusting your look to not scare people away. That it has to
Yeah,
be
I
this
was
rigid, stuffy thing.
what I realized when I was asking that question to Kiyoshi was that, I was like, okay, well, yeah, obviously when you are like the cool salesman who seems to know everything, this guy, if you ask him, he's probably going to try and impress you, right? Like he's going to try and be like, oh, well, I just want to be a cool guy or whatever. But then I realized maybe even to regular people, like if someone was to ask me and Spencer, we might not be salesmen, but we still come from a place of higher knowledge, menswear knowledge, right?
Higher
So
We have a
status within this
podcast.
topic.
That means
yeah.
we're experts.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah, so
We have a
maybe there is still
subscribe
that kind
button
of
on
thing,
Twitch.
Yeah.
it's not exactly an unbiased, like, oh, we're on the equal footing kind of a thing, because we're not,
Mhm.
right? And
Right.
so yeah, that the intimidation factor may still play effect into why, maybe the people I talk to, that Spencer I talk to, still have difficulty in kind of verbalizing or codifying what it is that they're into.
Yeah.
Um
Mhm.
Is it a
I know we want to
desire
switch.
to?
Yeah,
But
go
is,
ahead,
is it a
Aldous.
desire to
Exactly.
impress though, or is it more just an attempt to give an answer when you don't really have much to work on? Hence, you end up
Both.
saying, "I think it's more. I just need to give an answer to something to you more than I need to impress you
I would
by."
Well,
argue
because
saying that the fact that you want to answer means you're trying to save face, because even then, giving any answer is still better than saying no to these people, or I don't know to
Yeah.
these people. So that's still kind of, to me, that's
I think
saving
it
face.
depends on like what level they're coming into it
Yeah.
as, because as I said before, I think that if someone is a complete beginner, just you can't it's really tough to answer that question just because you haven't been exposed to a whole lot. You really have to kind of, I don't know, you have to look around before you can figure out what you like. And if you don't know the
Right.
vocabulary, if you don't know the different styles, it's really hard to say, well, I want to
Yep.
look like this if you maybe only
Well,
have one example.
that's a great
Or
segue
yeah.
to the next part of the section, because we have like 50 minutes left, and I think that's enough time. But that's why I think that, when you move out, like, okay, I want to look, like, oh, 50s Ivy, whatever, trying to codify this, or 30s, or even Italian Riviera. I think it's always best to ask, like, what guy do you want to be? Like, what,
Mhm.
like, like what is that guy? And I think that for a lot of people, they have an idea of that kind of guy, right? Like if a guy says, "I wanna buy jeans, but I wanna be, like, easy," right? Of course, you're gonna give him, like, some regular old jeans, right? But if they say, "Oh, I wanna be like, I wanna be able to work in these jeans," you know?
Yeah.
Or I'm a guy who likes to go outdoors, maybe give him some, like, selvage, you know, tell him, like, with some cuff, you know, with some, maybe wider leg stuff, right? Or
Mhm.
because it's like, you know, I don't think that Spencer and I or even the podcast reaches a lot of beginners. I think we already are so niche, you know, in that particular regard. But
Yeah.
we will occasionally get a guy going, "Hey, I want some chinos or military chinos, but I don't know which one." And I feel like there's a little bit of like that barrier broken there. But then that's why it's okay. What guy do you want to be? Like, do you want to be like the Japanese Americana guy? Like, do you want like the wider one? Do you want like Ivy military chinos? Like, do you want the clean cut thing? And that's a little bit of codifying it too. But like framing it in a way of like, like what's your lifestyle? What
Yeah.
like if people were
What's
to
your
look at you,
lifestyle? That's
yeah,
that's what I was thinking of
Yeah.
because as I said I think last week, I've been thinking
Yeah.
a lot more about clothing in terms of just like practicality because I'm not going out as
right,
much.
yeah,
And that's kind of how I've started breaking down, I don't know, like kind of codifying styles. Like you think about like so I don't know, like if I get dressed in the morning and I think I want to look like a war photographer, like war reporter or something. You
right,
think it's like, okay, so they are like, they need to have like a combat jacket or something with a lot of pockets. Like what makes sense for this person doing this thing?
Mm.
Um
yeah,
and
absolutely.
yeah, it's like, that's an easy way to break it down.
Yeah, because that is better than just saying, "Oh, I'm into milsurp." Because even if you say milsurp, that's still a lot. Like
Mhm.
that's still
Yeah.
like broken down by eras, you know, or
Yeah.
even the type of ivy. Even though if you go to ivy style, they're going to tell you that it's a specific time. But saying that you're into ivy could mean like a lot of different, or university style, as we're trying to make it more generic and more in
Mhm.
referential to its origins. Like it's important to figure out what guy is that? And I think
Yeah.
the more that I've hung out with Spencer, the more we watched movies, like we watched like The Post, and there was a guy who like in the beginning of it is like a reporter, but like probably from like the war, and he's wearing like an Oxford and like chinos, but then he's wearing like an M65 with like his like pocketbook or his like notepad and the pen in the
Mhm.
pocket, and it's like okay,
That
like
report
that's
is
a guy.
Daniel Ellsberg, right?
Yeah, it
Specifically.
was it's Salzburg.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's like, okay, you wanna be that guy, and, if you were to spin it even further to, like, not just, like, cosplaying, which we could tie into a little bit, but it's that, like, okay, you wanna be like, for Spencer, right? If you wanted to be that guy, he is literally a college student who used to be a journalism major, who is inspired by the '60s,
Yeah.
reporter style, and it ties into making sense for his lifestyle, his interests, or his previous major, and
Mhm.
I think
I'm
that
still a
is.
journalism major, to be clear. Still
Oh,
am.
you are? I thought you switched it.
Yeah,
I thought you
no, I
switched
wasn't. I wanted to switch
Allegedly.
it. I
Oh, you
wanted to
didn't.
switch
That's
it
right, you
from.
didn't. You
So
didn't.
I'm a communications major with an emphasis in journalism. I
There we
wanted to
go.
just
Okay.
do straight communications, but if I wanted to do that, I would have to
You would
start from
start
the.
over again.
I'd have to
That's
start my
right.
major over, so I didn't.
Well, let's
Right.
update the wiki.
Scam.
Yeah.
Um, and
Oh,
so
mate.
I think that that's like figuring it out that way. Obviously, this is not something you can have with just anybody, but this is good for friends that you have because
Mhm.
maybe it's a bit open. You can figure out like what guy you want to be, or
Yeah.
and I think that clothing this ties into like figuring out what the self is and what you want to show. You don't have to necessarily be the guy that you're trying to dress as, but you're in pursuit of that. Like
Yeah.
Spencer's,
So here we
he
go.
has a
Tintin is my inspo album. And here's another way, not thinking of it in terms of what guy you want to be, kind of like makes it a little bit easier. It makes it a little bit more broad. If rather than saying I want to look like Tintin, you could say I want to look like a 1930s intrepid reporter or
with
something
a
like
donut.
that.
Yeah,
It's like,
because
that just it like broadens it a little bit, and you can start looking
yeah,
elsewhere. You go from what, or it's like say you talk to an absolute beginner who's like, I want to look like Mick Jagger. Then you say, okay, so you want to look like a 60s 70s rock star. Well, how about this? How about this? How about this? And you can introduce them to
exactly.
more things. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and I think as I was trying to hint at this thing that like I think that's exactly how I got Adam into it because it wasn't like because if I just told him, oh dude, you'd look so good in Milsurp, he's gonna be like no, I don't. Like that, he
Yeah.
doesn't see it. But like, I'm like, hey, I've been to like the Rose Bowl. I see a lot of indie guys. They might not know it, but they sometimes they end up picking up like World War II chinos or adjacent chinos, and they look cool indie band guy, but these chinos can like apply to that look, like they
Mhm.
work for it. Or like, if you go to the Rose Bowl, so many people there are wearing vintage blue chore coats. It is
Yep.
like so common because every seller has like a bunch. They're all like $20, and
Mhm.
you can just wear them. And so like telling him that's like, oh, you're not trying to be like, um, fuck, who's the photographer for the New York Times again? Oh, Bill
Oh,
Cunningham. Like,
yep.
instead of saying Bill Cunningham or like 1930s workwear, it'd be like, dude, yeah, you're the Silver Lake hipster guy, And it's like, "Oh, well, I am. I go to Silver Lake, I go to record shops." I'm like, "Yeah, dude, so you should get this jacket." And it's like,
Mhm.
"Whoa, it's cool." And and then when he goes, "Well, hey, Ethan, how do I do that? But I want to do some of my stuff." I'm like, "Well, some of these guys, I wouldn't see them wear like, they don't really wear penny loafers. I like it because it's Ivy." He goes, "Oh, I like that Ivy look, but I don't like, I don't want to be an Ivy League student." I'm like, "Dude, you don't have to be the Ivy League student. You can just be this this guy who happens to like workwear, who happens to like Ivy, and that there his personal style, boom, right there." And then he
Mhm.
like it instantly clicked for him. Again, as a guy who is very cognizant. I mean, he's an editor for film. You have to know the tone, and you got to know different styles for different projects
Mhm.
that you're on. But it's like that kind of mindset, and and we'll get into what everyone else thinks that this guy is.
Well, it
But I
seems
think
like the
that
thing that pushed Adam over the border, then over the fence, then is just learning that there was more to style than what he had or what he knew about it before he met you, and you put everything out on a platter for him to review and look and say, hey, I kind of like that, um, and I kind of like that, and I guess I'll put these two together, and voila, personal style. But then
I
it
mean,
seems like it seems like the baseline is just introducing people to things, because if you
yeah,
just straight up go and ask them about what they like, they don't know. And let's say you ask someone, um, "What about milsurp? Do you like milsurp?" You'd either say, "I don't know. What is milsurp?" Or
Mm.
you'd say, "No, I don't like milsurp because in my head it's all camo and I don't like that." Not
you
realizing that
know,
they're yeah
yeah, I
M65s and
definitely
M43.
I definitely agree. I mean, that's usually not how these conversations happen anyway. But what I do think that I think is very special to this, and I don't know why I didn't think of this earlier, is that when you are young or whatever, when you use dating apps, there are pictures that you have to communicate who you are
Uh-huh.
to the people
Uh-huh.
swiping. And I think that is what makes it important because it's like, what do you want to look like to these people who are just looking at it? Because I mean, yeah, it involves picture, it involves like the style of pictures that you're doing too. Which is why lots of guys to look like a cool hunter outsider guy,
Got the
you have a
fish.
picture with yep, you got a picture with a fish. That's exactly it.
Yep.
But it's like taking that further, right? Like like in LA, you want to attract the indie girl, whatever. How do you appeal to that? And I was like, very, when we were looking at Hinge profiles, I was like, you wearing a plain old hoodie with a plain t-shirt does not communicate that you're an indie guy because we bonded over like graphic novels and films and music and everything. And I'm like, when I asked him like what those guys, and it happens to me too, those girls that you like, what do those guys wear? Because they have a type. And it's like, okay, well, they wear beanies. I'm like, well, wear beanies. Then like that's like a thing like, oh, how do I do it without looking like the guy? I'm like, well, I like this kind of beanie, or oh, like I see they wear these blue overshirt things or whatever, or we'll see it and he'll go, we'll be like, hey, I'll try to be like, hey, you've seen that blue overshirt? It's like, oh yeah, I see guys wear those. I'm like, yeah, it's a chore coat, and guys are into that kind of thing. It's not just like the workwear thing that I'm doing, and maybe that's why it's easier if you are actively looking, like if that's a big deal to you, like if you want to present, and of course we all do this, right? It doesn't have to be just dating profiles or Instagram. Like when you go out into public, you should still be cognizant of of what you look like, right? Like
Mhm.
because people, like we said, people are gonna make assumptions about you. They might not be important, they might be a fraction of a second, but they are going to make some assumptions. So you should use your style in a way that can answer some of those questions if you don't want to be asked about it. You know what I mean? And okay, let me just say like what I've like come to is even though it's still like a very a 30s this, Milsurp and Ivy and whatever, I still think that I look like a photographer, a writer and composer. I think I still dress with that in mind. I'm not, maybe it's still surprising to some people that that's the case. But I think that when people know that or they find out, later on, it kind of clicks, right? Because I think that those hobbies are what separate dressing in the suit for like corporate reasons to someone who just genuinely enjoys it. I think that's
Mhm.
also the baseline of why Spencer and I and probably the rest of us make these certain choices is because like we are a guy who likes menswear, but we are also men who like other things. And that
We're
will
men who like swearing, and that's why we like men's wear.
yeah.
Right.
Because it's
Finally,
Yes.
like if I said like, oh, I want to dress up and be dapper and be formal, I wouldn't like if that was the guy I wanted to be, I wouldn't pick the stuff that I'm wearing, right?
Mhm.
Like you wouldn't think to wear tweeds, which is why, as Kiyoshi has talked about before, and we'll get into him in a second. Um, but there's that whole idea of like the corporate look, right? The lawyer look. You have to fit in, and if that's the guy that you want to be, then it totally makes sense that you need shoulder pads. Maybe slim lapels, 2 button suits, all that. It definitely makes sense. But
Yeah.
if you want to communicate again that like, oh, I write music in my free time, or you do a podcast, and that's why there's so many memes about that because it's like, yeah, the podcast guys look like that,
Uh-huh.
like on Twitter and everything. So, I think that whenever I go out, even though there's still like the context of what I'm doing, whatever, there's still that idea of I think a composer would wear this, or I think a photographer or a writer would do this. It probably helps that those three things tend to have like a style or like a look to being creative. Like I can't imagine, or it might be harder for a guy to go, well, I don't want to dress like a gamer. Like that might be the harder part and
But
something
if
that we don't
someone you did
recommend.
ask someone, it's like, okay, so what's the guy you want to look like? It's like, I want to look like a gamer.
I want to
Like
look like
Ninja.
I
I
want to look
want
like a
everyone to know that I love games.
I want to look like
well, and
Fortnite
They
the thing
they
is,
send you an inspo album, and it's just a bunch of Twitch streamers and like middle schoolers wearing a Legend of Zelda t-shirts.
and
This is what I
sweatpants.
want to look like.
I would say that I think you could look like a cool gamer. I'm not sure that there are like the equivalent of like the like Grateful Dead t-shirts for gaming, unfortunately.
Yeah,
Like
'cause
cuz I
even
feel
like
like
retro gaming t-shirts are kind of lame. They're
they're kind of
kind of like
bad. Yeah.
there's
Yeah, cuz
like
I feel very glad about being a Star Wars fan because, like, yeah, when we went to Galaxy's Edge, right? Like, that
mhm,
whole day, I was like, I'm gonna dress like a Star Wars guy, you know. But I didn't. I didn't look like a like a Disney adult. I
yeah.
wore
Yeah.
a reissue or like like the old 1970s like pre-movie logo, like the purple font, like the skinny Star
Mm.
Wars font logo with blue jeans, jungle jacket, and Chelsea boots. I still think I look like a Star Wars fan, but it's like I want to be the guy who's into Milsurp and all this kind of stuff, 60s, 70s
Mhm,
style, and be into Star Wars,
yeah.
And I think that that's like I think that's pretty easy to, once you're able to think about it in terms like that, I think that's what makes it
Maybe this is a different
easier.
topic, but I think yeah, if you want to look like a fan of something, if you want to like communicate that you're a fan of something, you want it to be like I am a cool person, and also I am a fan of this, not just I
That's
am a
right.
fan of this.
Yeah, I think that that's where everything kind of goes down. But okay,
Yeah.
so you heard about me. You heard about me being a composer, photographer. You'll hear composing in 2 weeks for the next episode. The
you'll
next
hear
episode.
composing. He'll be writing
That's
it
right.
live when you play it.
Yep.
Yeah,
He's
but
gonna
okay.
come
How
to
about
your
this? Let's go
house.
through now. We got the last half hour here. Spencer, what guy do you think that you look like? When you're getting dressed. What is that? What is that guy to you?
I mean, like I said, like I mean, I do like one of my go-tos is kind of like, like war journalist or something, just because
Right.
it's like this kind of cool
It makes
mix
sense.
of it's this kind
Yeah.
of cool mix of like, military surplus, which I have a lot of, and like but then with civilian wear, because I don't like to do full. I don't like doing full olive drab, top bottom looks.
Right.
I like mixing it. I like the kind of like academic look. And again, as I've said on the Discord, as I said on stream, I'm like, I'm more concerned now with not looking like a phony. And I want something that makes sense for my lifestyle. And yeah, so it's just it just makes sense.
I
It's just something
Yeah.
that like, makes sense for me.
There's a lot of small cues too, right? To kind of
Mhm.
like kind of make
Like
that happen. I
stuff like,
mean,
stuff like carrying. I don't do it every day, especially now when I'm, again, not leaving the house most days, but carrying like a pen and notebook with me.
right.
That's like an easy way to nod to it, stuff like that.
I mean, I was about to say, and we'll move on, but like the fact that I started bringing my film camera around, kind of like, okay, now I'm like even more making it look like I'm a
Mhm.
photographer, because before I would just kind of keep it in my tote bag, and take it out if I'm taking a picture. But now if you wear it, it's kind of like, okay,
Yeah.
you are
No,
a
absolutely.
photographer who happens to be wearing those things, right? Like
Yeah.
it just happens.
No,
Uh,
exactly. And it's like I mean, I've done the same thing. Like I have my camera, which when I was doing my photo project, I would bring with me. And as I'm trying to actually like get better with it, I might bring it with me to more
right,
social gatherings. But yeah, that's
right,
another way where it's a functional item,
yeah.
also kind of an accessory. But
And I was gonna
yeah.
say, on the terms of accessories, I mean that's kind of why like I started wearing white socks because I not only for the ivy thing, but I noticed that you see it a lot in like punk stuff and
Mhm.
skater stuff. So like if you in my head, this is totally like it definitely doesn't come across, but it's like, oh, what if you were like a guy who like skate style because you're wearing white socks, but then
Yeah.
everything else is vintage or whatever,
Yeah.
or tailoring. But like
No, but
that's
I
kind of
think
like a mindset of it, you know?
and I think like I like looking not really like a, I don't know, a regular guy. I don't like being flashy necessarily. um I think like part of that is like, with my politics, with like the music I listen to, stuff like
Right,
that. I like kind of the more like subversive thing. I don't want to
right.
look like a rich fancy guy. I kind of like the slightly more um
Approachable.
yeah, like approachable, or like kind of more like, oh, like that's part of the reason I like vintage stuff. I kind of like when people can tell, oh, a lot of this stuff is secondhand, because I think it
Right,
makes it cooler.
right.
I think it's cooler than if it's like brand new and sparkly. So
Yeah.
that's part of it for me too.
Sparkles.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, it's also it's the idea of like wearing things that probably wouldn't make sense to wear with it if you were just
Yeah.
dressing for that, like, like bucket hats or like when I posted on MFA when I wore the like my cotton suit, but I wore it with a beanie and my M43, as you guys saw last week, right? Like it was like, whoa, like it shows that it's like it's different. Like
Mhm.
you're a guy who likes tailoring, but also milsurp, and you're wearing it together.
Yeah.
Um, and it's also like I remember like reading when I was writing my article about cotton suits and corduroy suits. It's like those fabrics are for guys who want to wear suits but who don't want to be corporate because it's like
Mhm.
not the corporate. It's not worsted, right? It's not worsted wool, and it's like
Yeah.
yeah, it's like taking that idea of like okay, you want to be the guy who's into that, but not what people think about typical guys, and then do it your own way. I think that that's kind of
Mhm.
like the baseline of this whole thing. Uh, MJ, what guy do you think that you dress like?
Um,
Gamer,
well, without defaulting to just guy that reads the blog and listens to the podcast. Um,
purple socks,
yeah,
white socks.
purple socks, loafers, OCBDs, knit ties. Um,
Mm-hmm.
I'll be brave enough to say I don't know yet, because I
Mm.
feel like
Nothing wrong with that.
I don't quite have a particular style. I'm like how Spencer said, like, the reporter looks always like at the sort of the core when he's like
Mhm.
putting stuff together, right? Because like something that comes to mind is, um since I work at the mall, since I work at
Yeah.
Uniqlo, I want to dress like using Uniqlo, but like the least basic stuff from Uniqlo, or like the least basic mall employee, um, you could say, because I mean, there's nothing wrong with just coming to the mall as an employee in like a flannel and jeans, but it's like
Mhm.
Uniqlo also has a couple, even though I don't wear like all their stuff, but like they have a cotton linen blazer, right? So I'll wear
Yeah.
like I'll wear a cotton linen blazer, and they'll kind of like oh you look good in that, so maybe there's like a sale thing there to make, but
Mhm.
also uh like trying out different stuff. Like there was one time where I wore like a hoodie and like a denim jacket over it, and then people were like, "Oh, MJ, like I usually see you like in like polo shirts or like chore coats and stuff like that. It's like weird to see you in like quote unquote more casual stuff." But it's like no, it's like it's don't necessarily want to be put in a singular box I guess when it comes to
Yeah. I
like personal style.
absolutely. I think the good thing, if again, like we talked about with style nirvana, I think that if it exists, it is the ability to try out new things or try things. Yeah, try out new things, but in a way that makes sense. Because
Mhm.
otherwise, then you're just doing, two different things, and then that's always that's a relative term. People might still see it differently, but I think what got casual style for me, to work was like, okay, I want to think about like the guy that I am, not like, oh, because I'd like to dress 30s. I don't want to just do 30s casual. It's like, what does a guy like me wear when he's casual? Like, think about it really like this creative or this guy who likes
So
menswear,
the
writer,
guy you want
whatever.
to be is yourself.
Yeah.
Wow.
At the end of the day,
Inspired.
right? That's what it
Yeah.
is.
Well, it's
You
also
know?
the whole like subverting expectations, right? Because
Yeah.
That's
like
true. It goes back and forth. Yeah.
if you say, oh, Ethan and Spencer started in vintage, and then it's like, oh, but you don't dress vintage all the time, or you don't, your idea of like, oh, MJ's a computer science major, or he's a gamer guy, but like, he doesn't dress, sweatpants
Yeah.
and Nintendo
Yeah.
t-shirts all the
There
time.
that's yeah, it's kind of hard, but I think it's like maybe it's just people should get to know each other more, instead of just jumping to conclusions. I think that's always good right off the bat. But it's like, I don't know, it's like it's an idea that, I think everyone knows themselves well. And if you can find a way to make this kind of new version of you, and we'll, as Kiyoshi suggested in the future topic, the awkward moment when you're experimenting and the transitional period is
Mhm.
probably, pretty tough. But it's that idea that, maybe it does make sense for who you are. Yeah, subverting expectations. Like, yeah, you're a CIS major, but also like, oh, okay, I can see it. Like, and I think that also comes with like being comfortable too. Like you're not the CIS major who's just wearing a suit because they want to wear a suit,
Yeah.
To look
as a
That suit
powerful.
business
guy.
guy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Before I ask Matt, I want to read some comments real quick here.
Oh yeah, we
Tash
got a
Term
good one
says,
from Tash and Turnips. That was good.
yeah, what about the element of surprise? When people ask what you do in your spare time, they never saw it through his aesthetic. He says, I try not to give everything away. I love thicker
Mm.
soles, thick leather military shoes with most of his outfits. I'm not trying too hard with elegantly lasted shoes, but he'll wear a cravat to soften it. I
Hmm.
think I think that's good too. Like
Yeah.
I the way I write and talk about it, it makes it sound like, oh, I'm being so open with like all my hobbies and everything. But there's still the thing of like, oh, they never knew that kind of stuff,
Yeah, I
Yeah.
mean, I think I like kind of, somewhat signaling my interests
Right.
or maybe my lifestyle in my clothing. But yeah, I think it's one of those things where you wouldn't normally it makes sense if you know it, but you wouldn't just like guess it, maybe.
Assume it, yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, because like if you
And
dress
the
like a
people observing
photographer,
have their own biases too, I suppose,
Mhm.
right? Because we
absolutely.
we
Sure.
might look at cravats and say, hey, this guy's more dressed than the person who always shows up in a pin collar and tie. But there are people out there who look at cravats and just think of douchebag from the 80s, or that
Yeah.
character from Gilligan's Island, right?
Right.
Huh.
Rich prick, and they
Yeah.
can't get past that. So
Uh-huh.
um, what
Good.
I'm saying, I guess, is if people have reached style nirvana, so to speak, which is, I think, knowledge to the point where you're comfortable knowing exactly what you want in all sorts of fashion genres. Like if I asked you what sort of jacket you like, you could pick out one. You could pick out the sack suit, for example, a sack jacket,
Mhm.
and say like I like the sack jackets. I like this. And on the other hand, if I ask you what sort of casual jackets you like, and you can say, oh, I like Letterman jackets or whatever, that sort of thing. But whether it ends up being a reflection of who you are, it's not certain because it depends on who's observing it. We could look at a sack jacket and see, oh, that's a casual suit jacket. This guy's not wearing Neapolitan tailoring, so he's more casual than Alexander Kraft or whatever. I think of the right guy, the real estate guy in Monaco.
That's
or whatever.
him.
Yeah, that's absolutely him. Yeah.
So yeah, we would look at sack suit boy and think that he's more laid back than Alexander Kraft. But depending on who you ask, depending on who's observing, someone could look at that and think, oh, he looks like the preppy douchebag I saw in this one movie from like the preppy douchebag from Dirty Dancing, who's always an Ivy sort of thing, and that guy's a prick, and he's probably a prick too. The guy I'm observing right now. It's difficult. It's difficult to get your opinions across. It's really It
I
makes
would
sense
say
if you know the full picture. It makes sense ultimately, but it doesn't always make sense in the real world because most people don't have the full picture or even close to it to make conclusions.
I actually think that most people don't have negative connotations. That strong of kind of like that guy looks like a douchebag. Like I think that only really happens nowadays when people are like if you're wearing like moto jeans and like a scoop neck
But-
long line tee, I think that's when that happens.
But Ethan, do you
Like,
remember there was a podcast, your mum's house or something like that, I was calling out people wearing boat shoes, right? Like there's no shoe in the world that makes a man look douchier or less fuckable or whatever they said than boat shoes, and they famously brought you up as an example. So
I don't remember
that
that.
came up.
What?
Wait, did he say they brought Ethan up as an example?
There was a podcast you put in a story, Ethan. That's why I remember it. Someone told you about a podcast that was talking about where the hosts were talking about how they really hated boat shoes and everyone who wears a boat shoe.
No, for me it was a Tide sweater. It was a Tide sweater.
Oh.
But they also
And it wasn't me.
But they also talked
It
about
wasn't
boat
me
shoes
as
too.
an example, but they were scrolling through Google, and you could see my blog post come up, which I think is hilarious.
Right.
But that's the kind of
I didn't get the specifics right, but the point is they saw Tide sweaters as instant douche marker, and then I listened to it and they went on to talk about boat shoes.
I think that makes sense with the Tide sweater look. I think now when people see a guy in an ascot, they think, "Oh, that guy's a dandy." Like I feel like
it's fancy.
it's more. I
He's
feel like
dandy.
if they think anything, they're not going to think, "Oh, look at that preppy douchebag." Ascot to me reads, "Oh, look at this dandy gentleman."
Okay, but depending on who you ask, that person, that dandy gentleman, or that steampunk fellow wearing that ascot could be a negative thing as well. Those guys are creepy. Those guys are
true.
weird, right?
I mean, it's gonna depend on how cynical the person you're talking to is.
Yeah, it is.
I think you're
I think
assuming
there's an
the
argument for
worst here.
people won't care what you're wearing
because-
either.
Yeah, I think that's. I think Matt's absolutely true, and we need to get onto these other guys' styles. But I will say that again, maybe just because Spencer and I and MJ we live in LA, and we see a variety of different things where they're not gonna. No one says anything, and everyone is dressed weird. I'm sure the same thing like in Portland or wherever else, San Francisco. Because I don't see ascots, but I see a lot of like bandanas. Like even like at like the flea market, it doesn't even have to be in a workwear context. Or the thing is, they might not even be aware they're doing it in a workwear context, but they're doing it because it's like a thing. It's that's just what it is. And these people are kind of just dressing, and it makes sense to like. I don't know anything about them, but I don't assume people are like. If I see a guy wearing moto jeans, I don't think he's an asshole. But I just think, wow, he really likes that look.
He really loved shopping at Zara.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. Which is really like it doesn't mean anything, but it does have some connotations. I don't think people in LA look down on tailoring as much as you think it does. I mean, maybe it's again, at least for us, it's not that bad because
we've got to.
It's also like the way you wear it
because as well, right?
Right.
I mean, yeah, but I'm saying like if you were like in Style Nirvana isn't exactly wearing the sport coat and then picking out the, the double rider from the Hercules or whatever. But it's the idea.
Yeah.
It's more to me. It's more of like how John Robinson does it, and he wears a sport coat not just with an OCBD and tie, but he wears that with a hoodie. That to me is style nirvana. Where you see he's being casual, but it makes sense. Like it's a natural extension of it, And then of
I
course, I
think
mean we've
style
seen John
nirvana.
wear.
Yeah, I think style
Yes.
nirvana is the knowledge necessary to confidently pick out what you like, what you want to
Maybe
wear
we have to
in all
have a
sorts of
whole thing about it because
Yeah,
I
well,
just
yeah,
think it's
in all sorts of
I
different
think it's
genres of
just when
style.
you just look completely natural in everything that you wear.
Yeah, that's my operation of style nirvana,
Yeah.
where it's like
But I
you
think
can
that
wear
comes as a
anything.
function of confidently knowing that this is me, that this is what I want, and from that you're perfectly comfortable in.
Yeah. I guess yeah, maybe we're just looking at it two
Yeah,
different
it's probably
ways.
just two different
Same
things because
thing.
I
Yeah, it's probably it
like
is.
I said,
Same
I
thing.
can wear.
We're looking at two different perspectives.
Yeah, because like like I think that's why a lot of us are able to wear a sport coat with like a t-shirt because it's like who the fuck cares? We're just this is us, you know what I mean? Anyway,
This is us.
Matt,
NBC.
what guy do you dress like? Or like what guy is
I
that to you?
actually, yeah, I'm actually curious what Jason's thoughts are on this. If we can smash cut to him.
Oh, you
Oh,
want to skip you? Okay, sure.
Yep, I think Jason needs
Jason.
a word in edgewise. So let's hear what he has
Well,
to say.
I don't really know what my style is. I mean, obviously I've been very inspired by, like punk and stuff, but
But
Mhm.
yeah,
I
like what
don't
guy is that?
yeah, I don't know
Like,
what guy that is, because it's sort of, it's this punk thing, but at the same time, I'm wearing tailored clothing, so it's sort of yeah, I don't know what kind of guy. I don't know what kind of guy this is.
well, I mean,
I don't know
it
what my
sounds like.
starter kit is.
Mm.
Well, I mean,
Well,
I
sounds
don't
doesn't
think it
sound
has to
good.
be. It doesn't have to be starter kit because I think it's just like when people see you, what do you want people to assume? Like if they looked at you, what do you think that they think of
I would
positively?
like them to think that I'm a cool guy. That's like, oh,
Okay.
that's cool. Maybe
Yeah.
they don't know why the suit looks so cool or something, but it's a feeling to them. Like, oh,
Mm.
that's cool.
Do you say that that's maybe an extension of like the whole punk aspect? Because I like
Probably. I
maybe
mean, because I
How
definitely
about do
don't
you
want to
have
walk into a room. I don't. It's not a power suit or anything. I don't want anything. I don't. You
right.
know, sort of blending in, but sticking out in a way as well.
yeah, so what do you like how about like what do you want like the like Mad King George like average customer to be? Like who are you trying to appeal to there? Because maybe
For
that's
those of you who don't know, Mad King George is a brand that will be coming shortly
Yeah.
yeah.
from Jason Sandigan.
Yeah. So that's the thing I've been sort of that's the thing I've been struggling with, right? Is what's the customer? Because
Hmm.
I made this really for me. It was sort of
Yeah.
this it was like none of the stuff really fit exactly where I wanted it. Not fit, but like none of the pieces came together the exact way I wanted. So I just started my own thing,
Right.
hoping that there'd be people. Um but I think, would be the sort of this underground kind of punk guy. The one I don't want to wear, leather like studded, jackets
Mhm.
or
Nope.
like I don't no, I don't.
It's never been about that for you because you're
You know,
rebelling against your family, right?
right. And so it's exactly in my family were these biker people. So for me to rebel against that was putting the suit on. And that's sort of now,
Right.
right? You have the punk of the punk aesthetic of like the 70s and 80s is just it's the codified punk, right?
Mhm.
Mm.
Which immediately makes it not punk.
Right.
So
Yeah.
so I've always been I try to take those same rebellious ideas, apply it to different clothing because you got to keep it fresh and interesting. Um,
Absolutely.
but I just want
Everyone's
to,
just
yeah, I
doing
don't
the
know. I just
same
want people to
version of
think,
it. Yeah.
yeah, I want people to think I'm cool. But
Mhm.
like maybe think that
Well, hey, yeah,
that looks really cool.
you're a
Maybe they
cool
won't think
guy
I'm
who
cool.
wears cool suits.
Yeah, maybe they won't think I'm cool personally, which is
Right.
fine. Not many people do. But I want
At
them to
least
be
you
like,
look cool.
oh, that suit that looks cool.
Okay.
Yeah, those big,
Very good.
the big peak lapels look cool.
Right. Okay. Well, that makes
I mean,
sense.
you guys all saw the sample I got, so
Yeah. Yeah.
Ah,
I
it
think
looked
I think
great.
it makes sense. Kiyoshi, what guy? We talk about this a lot. The guy going to these dive bars, these cool bars in the metropolis. What guy is that to you? And it could change, like we said, it could change for each one. But
Yeah, I mean, just to kind of take it back to like work and tailoring there. Now I've kind of want to be seen as like the guy who dresses basically fairly plainly and
Mhm.
not flashy. As I mentioned earlier, I don't want the clients that come to see me feel like I'm trying to upstage them.
Yeah.
Especially in front of their fiance if they bring her. If they
Right.
bring her. And
take that,
outside
wife,
yeah, take that future wife.
future,
Um,
future wife. That's right.
uh, or second wife, whatever.
That's
Third.
There's a
I
lot of
have had a couple of those, and they're great.
Oh man.
They're so much more relaxed, man. It's
Yeah.
amazing. But outside of work, I don't know. Like, I'm a little bit maybe like MJ, where it's like I'm still constantly trying new things. You could say maybe trend hopping.
okay.
Hmm.
In some ways, just
That's a
because
good
I
way to
want to
put it.
see, is this for
Mhm.
me? Like, I don't know. And I'll buy a couple things and try it out. And sometimes things are for me, sometimes they're not.
That's still a guy. Yeah, a guy who tries.
Yeah. And I
Guy
kind of
that
think if I
tries.
look back
The
over
Try
like when
Guys.
like
try guys.
Yep.
the
You
try
want
hard
to dress
guys.
like the Try Guys. Yeah.
We do not
That's a
recommend
look.
that one.
Yeah.
Don't try it.
Like if I go back to like when I was, started my Tumblr and like just look, if I were to like put all those fits up against the wall and just see the evolution,
Right.
it's definitely someone that has not found a uniform, but finds many uniforms and tries them and then discards them. So,
Mhm.
um, I think I'm more interested in like some elements of fashion and trends and willing
Yeah.
to try them. But if I'm being honest, like I really was looking at my closet. It's like, okay, what am I still keeping around after all these years? And it's like an old pair of like tan leather boots, military style boots. It's my barber jacket, my barber, um, and like that's about. And like I still wear Oxford shirt,
Hmm.
and blue
Mhm.
jeans, like normal, like faded, blue jeans.
Right. Yeah.
So I guess like if I had to put an outfit together, that's an. I don't,
Mhm.
it's very close to being the basic bastard in a lot of ways.
Yeah. I mean,
But
that's still a guy. That's
yeah,
still a
and here's the
guy.
thing,
The
that's
basic bastard.
the funny thing about that is like that will probably still be elements in my wardrobe another
Right.
10, 20 years, 30
Mhm.
years.
Right. Of
Like
course.
that is not going to
And
change. Like,
that's what I call timeless
I
fashion.
mean,
yeah, and but here's the thing, it's like I don't like necessarily strive for that,
Yeah.
but I know like those things will always be a
Well,
part of the rotation, but
Mm.
I keep buying and selling clothes that I want to try out, and
Hmm.
because here's probably the best word, hobbyist. It's a
hobbyist.
hobbyist approach to clothes.
There you go.
Someone that's always trying something new and weird. Sometimes it's not good. Sometimes it is pretty cool.
See, that is.
Or maybe it's only cool
Yeah.
for a few moments, for like a year or so. But yeah, I'd say hobbyist is probably a great way to sum it up. And you could take
Yeah.
that term and place it in any era.
Right.
I've
Of
probably
course.
dabbled in that hobby trend or whatever
Right.
for
See,
that era.
that's actually interesting because, I think obviously I've tried a lot of things too, as well. But I never wanted to be like to come across as a hobbyist. I wanted it to look. I wanted to like, if we're talking about skipping steps, skipping out, I wanted to skip to the part where it made sense for me. I
Right.
think, and that's. I mean, we talk about this all the time, where like that's impossible sometimes, right? You have
I
you
think
have to
that's
go
the
through it,
lie I wanted to tell myself that I was going to
right?
I was trying to like work toward. But now, if I'm just being honest, like I spend money on clothing as a hobby, like other
Right.
people spend
Yeah.
money on whatever hobbies they have.
Right.
Like
Mhm.
Right.
this is just a hobby, And
I have always
I've
called it a
come to
hobby.
like
Yeah.
come to that in like an acceptance phase where it's like I'm not trying to find this some style nirvana. This is just
Mm.
something that I blow money on. It has limited value. And
I think yeah, I
mostly
think
to
that's where
me.
me and Spencer have like diverted from because I don't think I've ever referenced it to being like a hobby. Like
No,
I think that's
yeah.
something
I
I've
mean,
like
yeah. It's like
consciously not done.
yeah, menswear is a hobby for me. It's like it's like a creative thing. It's like my creative thing that I do.
Right.
Yeah,
Yeah.
see, I think for me, like I think of it, I use creativity in it, but I don't think of it as like a
Uh-huh.
creative like endeavor. You
Hmm.
know, we're like, oh, I'm gonna try something new. It's still I don't know. See, I don't even know what that kind of aspect on that spectrum of like hobbyist enthusiast kind of thing.
Yeah.
Heinrich, what guy are you? Cool academian, like academic guy?
Akadako?
Dark academia.
Dark academia.
Well, it always has a function within that space because it's
Right.
uh, as I sometimes point out, like professors is one of like the three professions of where you're supposed to wear a robe,
Hmm.
along with judges and priests.
Yeah.
Right.
Traditionally, that is the case. It's the profession of the frock, which literally means that authority is literally invested in you through the clothes.
Right.
But very few professors or very few institutions do that. Like maybe at Oxbridge for exams, or a couple of places in the U.S. still have institutions where you have
Yeah,
to
I don't
wear.
think academic dress is even a thing at the Ivy Leagues anymore. Not in
Uh,
North America, anyway.
no, I mean, yeah, at Oxbridge you have to do it for certain exams and
Yeah,
events.
for exams you have to. Yeah.
I think but there are a couple of holdouts in the U.S. where you do have to wear regalia, like in a semi-regular basis. But of course, that has the immediate link of clothing to authority, which always happens in a teaching capacity as well. So that's always something to play against. You can't be neutral, right? It's a bit like going on a job interview. Like your clothing can never be a neutral factor. So that has to be played up against it in some way or some way or form. So I guess I always wanted to. That's like a thing I can use, like a tool I don't have to leave on the table.
Hmm.
But I've never had, and I took dissent about this last time as well. I just think I remember. I never had like an image of what I want to look like to other people in a very specific manner.
Oh. I mean, it could be general too.
No, but also it's like I want to be that guy to this person.
Right.
Is I don't know. That might well be like a social media phenomenon more than
Could
than
be.
an earlier age. That has, at least in the most acute form. Because
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
earlier version of this is if whether I wanted to be part of this group or not, which is not exactly the same
Very
question.
true.
Because
Very true.
in high school, if you wanted to be like for me, I just remember from my high school days, like you had to sort of choose if you wanted to be like a sports guy or like a hip hop guy, or
Right.
you could go goth, but that would be like a bit extreme. There were a couple
Right.
of versions that was available, but that was sort of those are social options first and foremost. They weren't sort of sartorial menus that you could sort of invent or do, and you
Right.
couldn't like do this on the fly. This had to be
Right.
prepared for a long time. If someone were to switch from one style to the other, they were surprised to pay.
Hmm.
That sounds so dark.
There was a social cost
Tribalism.
to doing it. Yes,
Yeah.
tribalism.
You shall be punished.
Yeah, well, I
We'll
mean,
Well,
pay the
yeah, because you
price.
could like establish like a group with people, and then now I kind of want to do the emo look, and then suddenly you're around people that like we don't do that. You're weird.
Yeah.
Stop wearing eyeliner. Get out. And then you're
Yeah.
ostracized, and you have to find a
Yeah.
new group of people.
yeah, people did,
gotta.
and people, and that, but it was sort of embedded in a social situation, or at least on a continuum of a certain.
See, that is something maybe MJ and I have been so or maybe just me, because when you grow up 12 years in a school
A
system
slave.
that has
Private school system.
that has a private school system that has
Yeah.
uniform, you don't really have any of that. Because I mean I was in school, before social media. Instagram and Tumblr came out, I mean I guess maybe MySpace, but that's like not really the same thing as it is as Facebook or whatever. But like we didn't have social media till like the later half of like high
Mhm.
school. and then
Mhm.
of course going into college. So like it was, and I didn't really get to hang out with people because I didn't have a car. I was younger, so like that whole idea of like dressing to fit in or trying to fit like that literally didn't apply. I actually think I don't like uniform because then it becomes about like just literal social currency. Like you can't even fake it in because you can't dress cool to fit in because
Yeah.
if people just know you as a nerd, then you're relegated to being just a nerd. Like you're stuck there.
Mhm.
And of course that was such a big shock in college where like, some people dress certain ways and athlete guys wearing the Adidas track pants that was so big in 2015, 2014, like that kind of time
Yeah.
and everything. So it's like, maybe yeah, maybe with social media, but like, I was kind of when I wanted to break out of that social thing of like just being around the nerds. Like I want to be like I like culture stuff. I want to be like I like film, and I want to look like I like film, or I want to look like I like
Ew.
writing music, you
Yeah.
know.
Film.
I,
I like
I, I do
pictures.
Cinema.
Cinema.
I do want to
But I
jump
like
in
to.
and say that
Oh yeah, MJ. What
I
do you
was I was on the flip side of that of Ethan's sentiments. Um, I guess because we all wore uniforms, it was you were cool, or I guess it was more about what you did, right? So if you wanted to
Mm.
be cool, you joined some sort of music, you joined band or you joined choir.
Hey, I tried,
Because
man. I
because
was in choir. Okay, I was.
because I mean,
I was in
also I feel like,
choir.
well, at least at my school there was a lot of crossover, right? Because it's like,
Right.
um
Yeah, that's the difference.
well, personally, right, I played basketball and I also was in
Okay.
music, band, choir. I worked in the cafeteria also for a year. So it's like that if everybody's like that, then you'll find somebody. Oh, I play basketball, but I also like to play video games. So it's
Yeah.
like you'll half
You're
the team.
textured.
I,
Yeah,
would, I wouldn't even say half the
yeah.
team. Everybody on the basketball team also plays video games. They're also
I,
nerds. So like it
mhm.
worked out
I
without being
think the
like, oh, you
unfortunate
look a
part.
certain way.
Yeah, I think the unfortunate part for my school was that there was definitely crossover, but they were still like cool. Like, you know what I mean? Like they
Yeah.
were still like, oh, they were still praise people at their churches, their parents were the ones who
Jesus.
still drove everyone around and everything like that. And then my friends, no offense to my friends, but it's like, oh, they're the ones who literally only do nerd things and then leave after school. So I was kinda, like, stuck there, like, I didn't have like, yeah, Scott, you guys know Scott, like, Scott would
Mhm.
leave. I was stuck at school, like, and it was a good way to kind of just leave and, like, not deal with, like, the social hierarchies or whatever, and Scott, he's in here too, but, he's not like, he's not a menswear guy, he's not a photographer guy, and I was developing interest in those things, but that's kinda hard to do if no one else is really into it, and you're not into sports, and you're just the music guy and wearing uniform, so it's really, really, really tough.
I love
I
I
wouldn't
football
say
mean,
stuff,
too.
the
MJ. I would say it was so like bubbly and so like small and just like because I think Glendale has a more diverse amount of people,
Mhm.
whereas mine was a lot kind of homogenous. And so if you weren't like, if you weren't also sports and music and singing and also a
Yeah.
class president, then you were like not even considered anything. Like you were either like a
Mhm.
deadbeat like skater person who went to parties. You were the A students who did everything, and then you're just like then you were just the weird people. And
I mean,
right.
there weren't a lot of weird people. It was like just me
Yeah.
and like a handful of people. So
yeah, at my high
unfortunate.
school, I also went to a very small high school. Like my
Yeah.
graduating class was like 50.
Oh
The
my
total
god.
population was 300.
Jesus.
And
I'm right there
base
with you.
It's
yeah,
still more than my
basically everyone, I don't know, yeah, basically people dressed mostly the same. Like everyone was just like dressed like how teenagers dress in Southern California, which is like shorts and with hoodies unzipped and the sleeves rolled up and t-shirts and like out of like skater shoes or whatever.
Yeah.
Um there was just definitely kind of one look at my high school.
Yeah. I also just want to say I'm not gonna blame my high school. I will say I am weird. I was definitely shy, and
Do
I
you
did
see
not.
this hat?
See my
You
badge?
know,
Hey, did you
yeah.
guys?
For
you
Crazy
guys-
Hat Day, I wore a Pirates of the Caribbean hat. Let me just like that's still a
Well, I'm
weird
glad
guy
that's on
thing
the
to
record.
do.
Yeah.
Anyway,
You have
Right.
one more. Yeah, you
Yeah,
have
go
one
ahead,
more.
Henrik.
That was the preamble to the point I was going to make.
Ooh. Okay. Let's
Yeah.
hear it.
Oh, shade.
Let's
Shut
let
the
Henrik
fuck
have the
up already.
floor.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Which is my relationship to clothes has more to do with less to do with the idea of a self presentation
Uh-huh.
than basically at discovering and adhering to a certain type of inner logic of what you might call the codification. And in that way, it's more like learning another language or something. Because if you're learning
Okay, yeah.
if you're learning another language, the language is kind of there. You can't if you like invent your own grammar or syntax, you're just not speaking the language.
No.
No one will understand you. There are certain and importantly, in case of grammar, those are a case of rules that aren't restrictive.
Mm.
If you break them, you don't communicate. That's that you're simply not speaking. And the idea there is that I've done this a few times, like moved to another place, learned a new language, sort of inhabited in a certain way, which famously, and some of you also grown up in multilingual households or whatever, and that brings a certain kind of dissociative idea. Someone like a famous writer once called it to be a bird and an ornithologist at the same time. This idea of it's a strange kind of self-consciousness.
Yeah.
But it is like different from like the logic of the self that I want to be this type of person and represent it to someone else. It's like I want to express something in this language and see if I can do something useful with it, if I can form a meaningful sentence in it. Or if
So your
but
primary
if speaking-
motivation is introspection, then, right, Henry?
No, it's not. It's more like an external, like an exploration of something that's there and available, and within that system, you choose certain idioms. Like maybe idioms is a good word for like POV or something. It's the idea of
Yeah.
is a
Wouldn't
POV
mode.
in POV
could-
in this
could-
narrative, wouldn't it be your
Dialect?
specific form of prose, your writing style, your voice? in
I was.
particular,
That's a very good
within the
point.
language?
I was about to say that. I was going to say, the thing I can see with this is like, you're speaking the language, yeah, but what region or what like are you speaking English like a farmer? Are you speaking it like you're doing the Midwest accent? Are you doing the Boston
no
Brahmin
farmers in the
in
Midwest.
English?
Those very
I was thinking more of a
social-
written voice, as in. But anyway, yeah. Then
Yeah, those are sort of social, social and even often like regional or hierarchical notions. But
Right.
they are, whereas an idiom is like could be like smaller or larger. But within this, there are of course like configurations. Like for me, there are stuff like like mid-century intellectual casual kind of stuff. It has been
Right.
a long time. Sort of
course.
those are the things I like and enjoy the most. Knitwear, shoes with coats, and this type of thing. That isn't. But for me, it is distinct from like the kind of self-presentation that came with the high school problem, and I don't think that social media is very good at representing like the idiom side of it, because it's all kind of there. It doesn't have the acquisition point. It's sort of it's more like the Google Translate rather than like learning something.
Yeah.
I don't know.
well, it's like going for a phrase book, I said, to put together a sentence or paragraph, as opposed to conjuring it up yourself, using
Right.
your own knowledge and your inner database of words and grammar and vocabulary in this new language,
And knowing the reason why something has to be this way,
right.
discovering
That-
that,
yeah.
and
Mhm.
that's a liberating thing to find out. It's not a restrictive thing.
Yeah.
Definitely. Okay, we have a little bit. Let's go through all just what do you know what guy you want to look like?
No, it would be the simple
Okay.
answer for that. But one thing I'd like to talk about and bring up, though, is I think there's a difference between you, Ethan, Spencer, from how you described your approach to this, and what
Mhm.
me and perhaps Henrik, I think, might think we might be on the same page here. I've never really thought about who I want to be. It's not my
Mm.
first priority. I'm aware of it. When I put together an outfit, I realize I look like, I don't know, mid 20th century TA or whatever the hell I look like.
Yeah.
But I don't dress with that goal in mind. Do you guys dress with that goal in mind sometimes? Like Spencer, you talked about how you like to be a
Absolutely.
reporter.
Well, something.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
I've never
So
that's never dawned on me before. It's more realization than a starting point. Yes.
So I think for me it's kind of half and half. A point that I kind of wish I had brought up earlier. Didn't think about it until a little bit after I talked. But I think another thing I can signal with my clothing and the way that I approach getting dressed in some ways is I don't know my like history. I most of the books that I have been reading in the last couple of years have just been nonfiction history books. I love going on like Wikipedia deep dives onto like various history. I just like I really like learning about the past. And specifically I kind of like I often think it's like, oh, I want to see this thing in person. Like when I read about like a historical location or like whatever, I wish I could have experienced. Wish I could have seen it. So I do that with clothing. And
So
I don't know. That's like
so for humorous example, it's like you wanting to feel what it would have been like to be in the cafes in Paris in the 50s, and
I
then
guess yeah, that's kind
and
of
in order to
it.
do that, dressing like Jean-Paul Sartre or Albert Camus.
Yeah, that helps. So that's another way that I approach getting dressed, which I think is maybe the same kind of thing. I'm just
that is
thinking of
kind of
like
the
what
same though. It's
historical
like
guy do I
you're
want to be?
dressing for a point still. Like
Yeah.
you're trying to be
Cosplay. It's
somebody or
basically
something. Yeah.
cosplay.
Mm.
Yeah, that's in contrast
Same.
to me and perhaps what other people. Henrik, I don't know if you want to chime in and agree or not, but um, I approach it from more of I will use the term introspection of looking into myself, sort of trying to assemble everything on a platter in front of me. Different styles of jackets, different looks, different things I can go to, and sort of doing going by the sorting through them by the porn rule. Like I know it when I see it, I know what I like, and picking a bunch of things from there, and then putting those together. And once I've got the different elements together, just following basic rules of matching and taste, I suppose, to put together outfits. And then
Well, I guess
it's only after that I realize I look like a certain type or certain archetype.
Right.
Yeah, it's not that I wanted to look like an Ivy grad student in the mid-50s, but because I like sack jackets, I like OCBDs a lot, it sort of ends up that way. But I didn't want to put that idea out into the ether, so to speak. And
well, I guess I could
and if you if
yeah.
Oh,
Did we
we
lose
lose
him?
Aldous?
Did-
R.I.P.
He was lying out.
Um,
Okay. Well,
yeah,
I will.
Yeah, all I wanted to chime
Back,
in with
guys?
was basically that
Wait,
it's
wait,
not cosplay.
Oh, he's back. He's back.
yeah, I my AirPod just died. Ran
Oh
out of
no.
battery on me, so yeah, I just put in the other one. I don't dress for. I guess I'll finish up by saying I don't dress for purpose. But if there is something to do with this idea of image and what I'm projecting out into the world and how that applies to me, it's more a question of what I'd like to avoid giving the impression of more than anything.
Okay.
I don't want people to think that I do like jazz. I don't want people to think I like jazz. I don't think that way. But what I do think is I don't want people to think I'm a young conservative and all that goes along with it. So maybe there would be elements that I really do like, and the first thing that comes to mind is felt hats, fedoras. I really like them. Like if we're talking about aesthetics and just appreciation, personal appreciation, I really like wearing fedoras, and I would wear them quite a bit. But in my mind, there is such a stigma against that particular garments that I feel it would be an insurmountable obstacle for a lot of observers to get past, the fedora stereotype, the neck being, that sort of thing. And So knowing that, I don't wear them. I wear them very, very rarely indeed. So yes, it's I don't think about what sort of image I'd like to project.
Yeah.
I think more in terms of what sort of image I wouldn't like to project, and that might take out a few pieces in my wardrobe. But in general, I kind of reached the point now where I know what I like, and I know what works together in my wardrobe, and I just go from there, really, primarily.
Okay.
Cool.
Yeah, I just want to squeeze in my anti-cosplay.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Because it's not cosplay, and actually cosplay seems to me to be like a symptom of maybe an age that has sort of forgotten to think deeply about authenticity in almost any way.
Yep.
The cosplay problem is like a secondary problem, sort of when that's when you start to worry about not just whether you can be authentic, but whether whether authenticity itself sort of becomes a kind of costume, or sort of the crisis is sort of double.
Mhm.
And that thing has a long history, but it's just very, very striking because cosplay has never entered my mind as even a possibility.
Do you think then the differentiation between cosplay and authentic expression versus
Well, that
cosplay
sounds
expression
like
would
that's
be
like a topic for like another time, man.
Yeah,
That's
I was gonna
like
say I
a
have some
whole,
thoughts about
that's
that
a
talking
too.
about
whole
It's a
this
thing.
whole
off
new
mic.
can of worms.
But I will also
Yeah,
say
well,
that I will really quick say that I think we also say cosplay kind of tongue in cheek.
It's
just
loose.
yeah,
Yeah,
because
it's loose.
it's because I've been to Comic-Con and Anime Expo, and I've cosplayed at Anime
Wow.
Expo.
Listen,
So
You've been to
yeah,
both?
listen,
Yes.
Alright.
Ethan's
and I
fuck
love it.
anime,
What do you?
But
bitch.
yeah, we will
Absolutely.
be back Wednesday.
Well, hold on, Matt. Did you want
Hold
to
on.
see your thing,
We
or did you
have
want to
Matt.
skip yourself completely? Yeah. Did you?
Who? Me?
You.
Yeah,
You're the
yeah,
Yeah,
last
you.
one.
There's barely time, man. It doesn't matter. I
mean, I don't have
lately
any
it's
We're
Where
gonna
to
make
go.
time for you.
We're
All right.
already
To you,
over.
up to you, man. Yeah.
I'm just saying, I think it's kind of like what MJ was saying is kind of like subverting and just kind of going off of color and texture lately. Like, I think I'm at the point where I have like a lot of inspiration, or if I want to do 70s or something else, like I know the formulas where I could just try something and just not be so
So that's the
formulaic about it.
guy.
The guy, I guess. It's just, yeah, it's hard to define, you know? It's just like I'm like interested in like how like, oh, this new Feral I got, this tan one might look with this what do you call it, brown Prince of Wales check suit. Like, I think that would be interesting to try that out. And just like, again, not, and oh yeah, the other thing I would say is like not looking approachable all the time too. I don't think a guy in a 5 foot or 5'5" wearing a long black ball McCann and Ushanka, a mask and sunglasses with a tote
Yeah.
bag is the most approachable person on the street. And I don't necessarily want to.
My life.
I know, right? And I just like, I'm fine with that. It's kind of like my little tortoiseshell. Like, I get to be me, and I also get to just kind of whoosh, kind of, you know, have that. But I don't mind wearing some Brandy Melville and like a crew neck, you know, and also being that kind of guy, just being a little bit more approachable, and just I can do both. And so I like, you know, it's kind of like what Henrik was saying, kind of finding different languages you can kind of work in, and just like opening yourself up as opposed to limiting it to just a 60s collegiate wear, you know? So that's kind of my philosophy on it at the moment.
Cool.
Very good.
Well, that's. I hope you guys enjoyed our little capstone on POV, because this is something that it came. I think it came up like at the tail end of last week, and I'm like, oh shit, looks like we're gonna continue this, in the following one. But yeah, you listen to the POV episode on all platforms. I'll read the essay that I wrote on it. I'm sure we'll have something on authenticity and cosplay in the future. It's a really great topic that keeps coming back up every time we talk about this, and that's the cool thing about menswear.
Or even
there's
like
so many cool
redefining your
things.
style. Like, you move into different parts of your life, or even move somewhere, and how you choose to kind of re-identify yourself. I think that could also be interesting. We kind of touched on it
Absolutely.
tonight.
I think that's kind of been the theme of like what Spencer and I've been discussing lately, kind of this concept of who you are, how that applies to what you wear, what moves you take, to subvert it or play into it. And that's why
Every step you take.
tomorrow there's going to be a new episode of the podcast, new essay. Spencer and I mean, I really love, I love like the series that we've been doing, honestly. And I think tomorrow's one on slouch and stuffiness will kind of tie into this. Yeah, and so listen to that. It'll be available on all platforms. The essay I wrote for it is really cool, I think, obviously. There is a lot of pictures about it. It mainly focuses on tailoring because it's a lot easier to talk about stuffiness and slouch with tailoring, because if you're wearing a denim jacket, you're cool. Who cares, you know? But yeah, it'll be available tomorrow. We will be back on Wednesday for our gaming streams. If you guys want to chill with us, we'll be there. And if not, we'll probably be talking about slouch next Saturday at 8 o'clock p.m. Pacific Standard Time.